Welcome back to Dark Night Scare. In today's episode, I'm sharing 12 true disturbing stories about road trips through the Appalachian backroads. If you've ever thought about taking the scenic route through the Appalachian backroads, this might change your mind. But before we begin, please consider subscribing and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now, let's start. I was 31 when it happened. We were taking what my dad liked to call the scenic route. He said it like it was a treat. I just wanted to get to Charleston and be done with it. A client of his had inherited some heavy old industrial equipment, stuff from a quarry or mill no one really knew, and needed someone trustworthy to take a look before hiring a shipping company. My dad volunteered, said he could use another pair of hands, but honestly, I think he just didn't want to drive through Eastern Kentucky alone. So, we flew into Lexington, rented a big white truck with a rattling tailgate, and planned to cut through the hills into West Virginia. No interstates, he insisted. Highways are for people trying to get away from something, he said while adjusting the mirrors. If you want to see something real, you stay on the ground. It sounded poetic, but I knew he just didn't like fast lanes. The first few hours were okay. The roads were tight and curved like they were designed by someone who had never seen a straight line, but they were mostly empty. We passed through tiny towns with single stop signs and buildings leaning like they were tired of standing. Some of them had names I forgot before we'd even made it past the last mailbox. Dad pointed out stuff constantly. Old churches, iron-coiled creeks, barns that were somehow both collapsing and still in use. He loved the hills, always had, said they felt alive. I mostly stared at my phone trying to load a map or get a text through. Nothing worked. The signal kept vanishing and coming back one bar at a time like it was teasing me. Eventually, I gave up and watched the trees blur by. It was around mid-afternoon when things started to shift. At first, it was just subtle stuff. The air felt denser. The road narrowed until it barely felt paved. The trees got taller, thicker, darker. My ears started popping a little, like we were climbing. Even though the dashboard didn't show much elevation change, then the GPS in the truck started spinning in slow circles, like it had lost its grip on the world. My phone was dead. No service. Nothing. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 2:17. About 20 minutes later, I looked again. Still 2:17. I pointed it out to my dad. He tapped his watch, frowned, then turned it toward me. It also read 2:17. We didn't talk much after that. Then we hit the fork in the road. There was this hand-carved wooden sign nailed to a post, almost hidden behind a mess of vines. The letters were rough, weathered, and dark, like they'd soaked in years of rain. Coal Hollow, no arrows, no mile count, just those two words. The gravel road it pointed to didn't show up on the GPS. Not that the GPS was even working anymore, but my dad took the turn without hesitation. That's what the guy texted. He said, "Coal Hollow cuts through. Saves time." We bumped along for a while. The gravel got rough, uneven. The trees started closing in. There wasn't even enough room for another car to pass if one came the other way, but none did. We hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour, not even parked in driveways. It got so quiet that the only sound was the tires crunching over loose rock. No birds, no bugs, no wind. Just that constant rolling under us. That's when we saw the kid. He was lying right in the middle of the road, arms at his sides, shirtless, skin grey with dust, maybe 8 or 9 years old. No shoes, no backpack, just shorts and stillness. My dad braked hard. The truck jolted to a stop a few feet from him. We couldn't go around. On the right, the land dropped off in a sharp slope. On the left, the trees were pressed in so tight it felt like a wall. The kid didn't move, didn't even twitch. I looked at my dad. He looked at the kid. Then the woods moved. 5 men stepped out from between the trees, slow and silent. 2 on the left, 3 on the right. They walked like they knew exactly where to go. One had a shotgun slung over his shoulder. Another held a knife that looked handmade, maybe a carved bone handle, maybe something worse. Their clothes were stained, layered, and heavy, like they hadn't been washed in years. Their eyes were steady. Their faces were blank, not angry, not threatening, just focused. They didn't yell, didn't say anything. They just came toward the truck. One walked straight up to my window and tapped it once with his knuckle, just once. "You're going to drive us to the old town," he said. No questions, no options. Then they started opening the doors. The kid who had been lying there like a corpse stood up without help. No limp, no blood. He smiled and climbed into the back seat. That grin, something about it felt wrong. His two front teeth were too small, too neat, like they didn't quite fit his face. Two more climbed in beside him, calm as anything. The shotgun guy slid into the passenger seat next to me. The last one waited outside until we started rolling, then climbed into the truck bed like this was normal. My dad didn't speak, didn't argue, just shifted into drive. The man beside me started giving directions, not normal ones. No street names, no distances. "Turn at the bent pole," he said. "Go past the yellow mailbox, then right." Everything was described by things you'd only notice if you'd been there 100 times. Broken signs, dented trash cans, an old couch, left to rot by the road. And somehow those things were always there. At some point, I realized we weren't climbing or descending anymore. The road just leveled out, stayed flat, like we were stuck in one long, unchanging stretch of forest that didn't follow the rules of the real world anymore. I asked, barely above a whisper. "Where are we going?" He turned just slightly toward me. "To where they buried the town," he said. "But it ain't dead." And that was it. No follow-up. He didn't say another word the rest of the drive. Eventually, we reached what looked like a clearing, though the trees never really pulled back. The road just ended. Out of nowhere, there it was. Harlow's Edge. At least that's what the cracked stone markers said. I'd never heard of it. No signs, no mention on any map I'd ever seen. Ruins everywhere. A collapsed church. Burnt-out homes overtaken by vines. A rusted water tower leaning like it was bowing to something. The man in the truck bed hopped down. The kid followed, carrying a small duffel bag. I hadn't even noticed it before. Shotgun guy didn't move at first, just turned to my dad and said, "Wait here." Then he got out and went with them into what looked like an old general store. The front windows were shattered, the roof half missing. I told my dad, "We should go right now." He didn't argue, but he didn't move either. When I asked why, he just said, "I don't think we're supposed to yet." They were inside a while, long enough that the silence started feeling like part of the landscape. When they came back, the kid was holding a metal lunchbox. It looked brand new. No scratches, no dust, just smooth and silver, like it had been made that morning. They climbed back in. "Take us to the crossing," Shotgun Man said. We didn't turn around, just drove forward, even though there hadn't been a road there before, but now there was. Eventually, we came to a narrow bridge over a dead train track. That's where they got out. The man took the lunchbox from the kid and looked at my dad. "Don't come back here," he said. Then the kid stepped forward, looked at me, and said they don't want to be found, and they walked into the trees and vanished. We sat there a long time. Eventually, we must have driven back. I don't remember the turns. I don't remember the road widening or the trees letting go. But eventually, we were near the highway and our phones lit up again. At the next gas station, my dad went to the restroom. When he came out, he pulled up his shirt and showed me his shoulder. Eye bruises, finger shape, too big to be from a child. He hadn't been touched, not that I'd seen. A week later, back home, I opened the glove box looking for a receipt. The lunchbox was there. We hadn't taken it. We hadn't seen it since the bridge, but there it was inside. A loop of black hair tied with red thread. A faded photo of 6 people standing in a field. 3 kids, 3 adults, all staring straight at the camera. No smiles, no life in their eyes, and a single baby tooth small and perfect, sitting right in the center. We left it under the old tree near the edge of the yard, just set it there and walked away. I was 18 when I decided to drive the Appalachian Scenic Byway by myself. My name's Kelsey. I had just finished my first year of community college, and for some reason, that felt like a big enough deal to earn a solo road trip. I'd bought a used Subaru, scraping together the money from working Saturdays at a coffee shop and tutoring 2 middle school kids who absolutely despised algebra. I packed the car with snacks, clothes I wasn't going to wear again, a sleeping bag just in case, and enough podcasts to last me for weeks. When I told my mum I needed the trip for self-discovery, she gave me this long look, as if she wanted to say no but knew she couldn't stop me. The truth was, I didn't know what I was looking for. I think I just wanted to be out of range, out of sight, disconnected both literally and emotionally. By the 4th day, I'd passed a town called Ardagh. The mountains around there begin to feel different, more folded in, more silent. It's beautiful, but not in a welcoming way. The roads grew narrower, and the trees seemed to press closer. My map app was still managing a faint signal until somewhere outside Yancey County. Then it just quit. Blank screen, no service. I wasn't too worried. There were still signs, and I figured as long as I followed the byway markers, I'd be fine. I'd been driving without seeing another car for maybe 20-25 minutes when I came around a bend and saw this old wooden sign off to the right. Welcome to Darnell Gap, established 1891. The paint had peeled, and the letters looked like they'd been clawed at or just rotted away over time. I slowed down a bit, looked around. No town, no stores, just sign. A couple more turns later, the fuel light came on. I let out an annoyed breath and checked the gauge. The needle was barely above empty. I figured I'd stop at the next place I saw, fill up if possible, or at least ask someone where the nearest gas station was. The road sloped down into what looked like a hollow, and that's where I saw it. This small white building, maybe the size of a trailer, with arched windows stained by dirt and a crooked cross bolted to the top. It didn't resemble anything specific. Could have been a church, maybe a community center. A hand-painted wooden sign above the door read, "Community Pantry." That was all. Nothing else around but trees that seemed eager for the structure to vanish, so they could close in. I pulled in, parked, and got out. The air smelled like old pine needles and rusted metal. Nothing moved. No birds, no wind. The gravel patch I parked on was empty inside. It was dim and smelled like old cardboard and something faintly metallic, like the scent of blood, but duller. Shelves lined the walls, holding dusty cans of green beans, soup packets, stale crackers. A small counter near the door held a cracked bell in a rusty cash box. Someone had taped a note beside it. "Pay what you can. God sees everything." That was either comforting or ominous. I couldn't decide. I pulled a 20 from my wallet, dropped it in the box, took 2 water bottles from a shelf, and turned to leave. There was a man standing in the doorway. I hadn't heard the door open, didn't hear footsteps. He was just there, tall, maybe mid to late 40s. He wore thick, heavy boots caked with dark, dried mud. His jeans were soaked up to his shins as if he'd walked through something deep and hadn't bothered drying off. He wore a green flannel buttoned all the way up. He just stood there looking at me with a neutral expression. Didn't blink. "You need help?" he said finally, his voice low and strangely flat. I told him I was just passing through, low on gas, trying to find the nearest station. He said, "Station's gone." "Since the flood?" I asked. "What flood?" He didn't respond, just kept looking at me as if I'd asked something stupid. I said thanks and carefully moved past him. He didn't try to stop me. He didn't move, just turned, his head slightly, keeping his eyes on me all the way back to my car. I got in and drove away. About a mile down the road, I reached a fork. There was a wooden sign nailed to a post, Brindle Loop Trailhead. It looked like a hiking trail, but It was so overgrown it seemed no one had walked it in years. No parked cars, no signs of life. Something about it made me uneasy. I decided to turn around and go back the way I came, or so I thought. Not even 5 minutes later, I passed that same rusted mailbox with Dehenso painted in fading white letters. I stared at it as I went by, my stomach doing a little flip. I recognized the dent in the side. I definitely passed it before, only I was supposed to be going back the way I came. Then I saw the same bent road sign, same cracked pavement, same white building, the pantry. This time the front door was already open and the man was gone. I didn't stop. I kept driving faster. 10 minutes later, same mailbox again. And again. I wasn't making any progress. I wasn't even moving in a straight line. It was like I was stuck in some kind of loop. I started checking the dashboard clock, convinced maybe I'd lost time, but it ticked forward normally. That somehow made it worse. On the fourth loop, just after the curve, where the trees leaned in close enough to scrape the car, she was suddenly there. A woman standing in the center of the road, long dress hanging to her ankles, bare feet planted, right on the faded yellow line, arms still at her sides, fingers motionless. Her skin was grayish, sickly pale. Her face was turned just slightly towards the car, but her eyes weren't open. I slammed the brake, swerved, managed not to hit her, looked in the rearview mirror. No one. I didn't stop to check. I didn't even look back again. I drove until I saw a narrow dirt road veering off to the left. No signs, just a gap in the trees. I took it, heart pounding. The car bounced, scraped the bottom once. Branches swiped at the doors and windows, but I didn't stop. The road, or what you could call it, ended in a clearing. I let the car coast to a stop. The engine coughed. The fuel light had stopped blinking. The tank was empty. Ahead of me, in the center of the clearing, 4 lanterns hung from tree limbs, flickering yellow, like candles behind stained glass. Beneath them was a ring of stones with a blackened patch of ground inside, burned and scorched. And within that, a pile of bones, small and delicate, some cracked in half as if someone had deliberately split them open. I stepped out of the car. My phone still showed no service. I gripped the flashlight in one hand and threaded my keys between my fingers with the other. That's when I heard it. A layered, humming sound. Not just one person. Multiple voices. Men, women, maybe even children, all humming the same deep, eerie tone. I couldn't tell where it came from. It was just around me. I backed up slowly, staying outside the circle of lanterns. Then I noticed the carvings. Symbols burned into the bark of the surrounding trees. Not letters, something older. They formed a perimeter around the clearing. I stepped back inside that circle, and the humming stopped abruptly like someone flipped a switch. Silence. Then something snapped behind me, like a branch being broken underfoot. I spun around. Nothing there. And then the whispers started. Fast, urgent, like someone tuning a radio stuck between stations. I couldn't understand the words, but I knew they weren't meant to comfort. I ran, dropped the flashlight, didn't look back. I just tore through the brush and branches, breath-catching, limbs grabbing at my clothes. I made it back to where I thought the road should be, but the car was gone. Not wrecked, not broken down, just gone. No tracks, no marks in the gravel, no sign I'd ever been there. I stood there sweating, heart thudding painfully, waiting to hear something, anything. And then I saw headlights. A truck rounded the curve. Same guy from the pantry. He leaned out of the driver's window. "You're off the loop," he said, as if addressing a child who'd stepped over a line. I took a step back. "They get mean when you step out of bounds," he added. "Who?" I asked. He didn't answer, just looked tired or scared or both. "You can't stay here," he said. "They'll follow." I didn't wait. I turned and bolted off the road into the woods. I found a creek and followed it downhill, stumbling most of the time. It felt right, like it was pulling me towards something real. At sunrise, I collapsed on the steps of a tiny ranger station, more like a shed with a radio antenna. A woman in uniform opened the door. She gave me water, asked me what happened. I told her about Darnell Gap. She frowned, said that area has been protected forest since a fire 80 years ago. What fire? It wiped out everything. No buildings, no towns left. Nobody's lived there in decades. She showed me a map on the wall. No Darnell Gap, no Brindle Trail, just a blank patch of green, labeled restricted unmaintained terrain. I was 22 when my buddy Jordan and I decided we were overdue for a road trip. We were supposed to be heading down to a music festival in Ashford, a weekend of tents, local bands, and beer that tasted like yeast water. That was the plan anyway. But Jordan had this thing about finding the real America, especially in the South. He said GPS ruins everything, takes you around the weird stuff. So, naturally, 20 minutes outside of city limits, he started turning off onto random gravel roads with no signs, like we were hunting for buried treasure. He had this old Suburban, once forest green, but time and sun had bleached most of the life out of it. The roof rack rattled any time we hit a bump, and the passenger side mirror was held on by duct tape. There was a cooler in the back seat, half full of warm beer and maybe a sandwich from the day before. He kept saying we'd stop for ice, but never did. The whole thing smelled like old vinyl and stale energy drinks, but it was our base for this little adventure, and somehow that made it feel solid. We left the main road somewhere around a place called Barrow Hill. The sign was half missing, so it might have said barrel or bro for all I know. It was the kind of place that looked like it used to have a diner and a post office, but now just had ghosts of both. I made a joke about how we were probably going to end up in a horror movie. Jordan laughed, but not hard. That kind of weak laugh where you can't tell if someone's actually enjoying themselves or just trying to keep the mood up. The first hour wasn't bad. The trees got thick quickly, the canopy closing overhead until it felt like we were inside something instead of under it. Moments of sunlight slipped through the branches, illuminating patches of road like spotlights. Birds dove between trees. I think I saw a fox at one point. Jordan had his arm out the window, tapping the roof in rhythm with the music he'd found years ago in the glove box. The reception dropped out completely before we even hit the first fork. No bars, no blinking signal, just searching in the corner of the screen. I pointed it out, and he just grinned. "Now it's real," he said, like that was some kind of badge of honor. We passed a gas pump shortly after that. It was sitting by itself, half swallowed by vines and moss. No building, no driveway, just the pump. The numbers were ancient, barely readable. The price per gallon looked like it hadn't changed since before color TV. Jordan slowed down and leaned out his window, as if wanting to take a photo. I told him not to waste time. We didn't know how long this road would go. He didn't argue, but he stared at that pump a little too long, like it was familiar, like he'd seen it in a dream. The sun started going down around 7. We came to a fork. One road continued straight and seemed like it might lead somewhere normal. The other curved down sharply into a hollow with no sign, no shoulder, just gravel disappearing into shadow. Of course, Jordan chose the second one. "Why that way?" I asked. He said it just felt right. His smile was there, but it was tight, like he was trying to hold something in. I almost told him to stop and turn around, but I didn't. I wish I had. As soon as we turned, everything felt weird. The kind of weird you don't notice until you realize what's missing. No crickets, no wind, no birds. The trees were too close. Branches reached over us like they were trying to keep something in. The air felt thick. I rolled my window up without thinking. The gravel crunched louder, and the tires felt like they were dragging instead of rolling. We dipped down low, and patches of mist clung to the road like something spilled and never dried. I tried to say something, make a joke, lighten the mood, but my mouth was dry. My hands kept tapping my thighs, small, nervous movements. We rounded a bend and saw it. A white sedan parked sideways across the road. Front tire shredded, driver's door hanging open. It looked like it had been left in a hurry. Long, deep scratches ran along the passenger side. not from another car. These were uneven, jagged, like claws. That was the word that came to mind, even though I didn't want it to. "Keep going," I said, but my voice didn't sound like mine. Jordan didn't say anything, just eased the Suburban around it. The edge of the tires dipped into the ditch, and we scraped the undercarriage, but he didn't stop. I kept my eyes straight ahead. I didn't want to see if someone was sitting inside that car. We kept driving, slower now. The road was narrowing, and the trees were getting even closer. I caught movement up ahead. One figure off the shoulder, standing perfectly still, hoodie pulled up, hands in pockets, head down. I leaned forward, squinting. "Jordan," I said, "there's someone." "I saw him," he said, flat, like it wasn't surprising. We drove past. The figure didn't move. Then we saw another one and another. Same hoodie, same posture, standing the exact same way, all a few yards apart, like they were deliberately spaced out. I whispered, "What the hell is that?" And Jordan just shook his head. "Don't look at them, just keep facing forward." We hit a rut deep enough to jolt us both. The Suburban rocked, the cooler rattling in the back. Beer cans thumped against each other, and then we saw him again. Same hoodie, but this time he was crouched in the road, knees bent, arms dangling low. The headlights lit him up, and I swear to God, his skin was smooth and pale, almost translucent. He started rising slowly, not like a person stands, but like something was pulling strings from above. His arms hung too long. When he faced us, there was no face, just blank-skinned flesh. No eyes, no mouth, no nothing. Jordan hit the brakes so hard we slid sideways. The tires locked. Dust flew, then silence. The engine coughed once, then died. Headlights blinked out. Total darkness. I was shaking. I reached down and grabbed the flashlight from under the seat, clicked it on. Weak beam, but better than nothing. I aimed it at Jordan. He was frozen, staring at the rear view mirror. Wasn't even blinking. I turned to my right and there it was. Something pressed right up against my window. Grey hoodie. I couldn't see its face because there wasn't one. Just fog on the glass where it should have been breathing. The flashlight beam caught on its chin, or where its chin should have been. Pale, waxy skin. I dropped the flashlight. The sound disappeared into the car like it had been swallowed. Jordan tried the key again. Nothing. Then one more time. The Suburban jolted. The headlights snapped on. We were moving. Reverse. We backed up fast, gravel spitting out from the tires. We scraped something, and I thought we were going to get stuck again, but we didn't. My elbows slammed into the door. The cooler flipped. Beers exploded open. The car smelled like booze and desperation. We flew past the crouched figure. He didn't move. The others stepped forward from the trees. Same hoodies, same faceless heads. They didn't chase us, just moved to let us pass, like mannequins on hidden rails. We passed the white sedan again. Still empty, still open, still wrong. When we hit paved road again, it was like surfacing from underwater. My ears popped. I hadn't even noticed. They were ringing. We didn't talk. Not at first. Then I asked someone at a diner if they knew a place called Barrow Hill. The waitress paused, looked at me like I'd said something disgusting. "Ain't been a Barrow Hill around here in a long time," she said. "Burned down. Nobody goes out there." We ended up at a gas station with flickering fluorescent lights. The guy behind the counter looked us up and down like we were carrying something bad. Jordan asked again, "Where's Barrow Hill?" The man's face went still. "No such place anymore. Not since the 60s. Jordan didn't speak, just stared at me. Then I smelled it again. Faint, metallic, with something underneath, like barbecue gone bad. I touched the passenger window. My hand came back damp. There was a fingerprint in the dust, small, pressed in deep, smearing as it slid down. We didn't stay. Got back in the car and drove until we saw signs we recognized. I came up with what I thought was a brilliant idea. A solo road trip, just me and the car, no specific destination in mind. I figured I'd cruise the Appalachian backroads, take the scenic routes, maybe find some quiet little towns where time felt like it moved slower. In my head it sounded perfect. Scenic overlooks, maybe an antique shop or two where the cash register still made that sharp metallic sound, and a greasy spoon diner serving pancakes large enough for a truck stop hubcap. I didn't even tell anyone where I was going, not because I wanted to be mysterious or anything. It just felt good to disconnect. I was tired of constantly sharing every move. Lately it felt like the noise wouldn't stop, notifications bleeding into my sleep, my phone buzzing so often I started checking it even when it wasn't buzzing. So I threw a bag in the trunk, filled the tank, and hit the road. The first few hours were exactly what I needed. 2-lane roads, winding like lazy snakes through hills and trees so thick you couldn't see past the first row. Every so often, I'd spot an old barn leaning sideways in a field, its roof caving in like a broken spine. I drove with the windows down, my arm hanging out, just soaking in the quiet. Well, not quiet exactly, just no people, and that felt good. For a while, I passed the occasional truck, but only for a second before it vanished in the mirror. Then the phone signal started dropping. 4 bars, 2, none. I wasn't worried. I'd downloaded offline maps. Felt pretty smart about myself for that. But the longer I drove, the more the roads stopped making sense. The map said the road should curve left, but it didn't. Street names disappeared. Roads branching where there weren't supposed to be any. It was like the GPS was trying to follow something that kept shifting beneath me. An hour went by without a gas station, a store, or even another car. That's when I saw the sign, if you could even call it a sign. Just a rusted sheet of metal nailed to a post, edges eaten by weather with one word painted in peeling black letters. Brenner. No arrow, no distance, just a name. And it wasn't on my map. I told myself it was fine. I needed gas anyway. Maybe Brenner was one of those forgotten towns you read about online, the kind with a single diner where the coffee tastes like burnt rubber, but the pie could be amazing. So, I turned and followed the sign. The road narrowed as it climbed, trees crowding in like they wanted to swallow the car whole. The branches laced together overhead until it felt like I was driving through a tunnel. My stomach gave a little knot, but I told myself it was just because I was hungry. By the time the incline leveled out, I saw the town, or what was left of it. One short street lined with buildings sagging against each other like they were hiding from something. Their windows were black, curtains pulled tight. No cars, no lights, no movement. Just a strip of pavement cracked like old skin, and buildings that looked like they hadn't heard laughter in 50 years. Then I noticed the smoke, a thin column rising from a chimney at the far end of the street. So someone was here. I parked next to what used to be a gas station. The pumps were still standing, hoses drooping like dead snakes. The windows were gone, weeds clawing through the floor inside. That's when it hit me. Not just quiet, but empty, dead quiet. No wind, no birds, no bugs, not even the distant hum of an engine. Just me breathing and the sound of my own shoes crunching gravel. I told myself this wasn't weird. People live in forgotten places all the time. They like being left alone. So I walked toward the building with the smoke. It looked like an old diner, the kind you see in black and white photos. Dull metal siding streaked with rust, a bell above the door. When I pushed it open, the bell didn't tinkle. It shrieked, high-pitched and sharp, like it was tearing through the air. Inside, dust coated everything. Tables, stools, even the napkin holders. Everything except the counter. The counter was spotless. Not a smudge, not a speck. And behind it stood a man, tall and thin. His clothes were faded, as if they'd lived a few extra lives. Button-up shirt, suspenders hanging from bony shoulders. His eyes were pale. So pale. They looked like someone had drained all the color out of them. He just stared at me. Didn't move. Didn't blink. like he was measuring me. Lost. His voice rasped, like metal scraping metal. "Yeah," I said, forcing a laugh. "I was trying to get back to the main highway. There's no back," he said. Then he smiled. And it wasn't the kind of smile you give a stranger. It was the kind you give when you know something they don't. Alice Bowl. I laughed again, too loud, as if he were joking, but his lips barely moved. "You can't stay out here," he said. "Gets dark quick." I glanced out the doorway, and he wasn't wrong. The sky had shifted in the 5 minutes I'd been inside. Heavy clouds gathering over the hills, shadows stretching long and sharp across the street. "Is there a main road nearby?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer right away, just reached slowly under the counter and set down a ring of keys. Old things, big and rusted, dangling from a bent loop. The clink was so loud it made me flinch. "Or the cabins," he said. "Best lock the door before dark." "I'm not staying," I said, stepping back. His smile didn't fade. "You are." The bell above the door chimed behind me. Someone else had come in. A large figure, broad shoulders, hat pulled low so I couldn't see his face. Then a woman slipped through behind him, her dress the color of bone. Her bare feet left wet prints on the tile, then another and another until the diner was full, silent, staring, faces pale and hollow, like something had scooped them out and propped them back up. I ran. The keys hit the floor with a metallic clatter as I shoved through the door and bolted for my car. The air outside felt thick, like running through water. Behind me came the scrape of shoes, then the pounding of feet. Fast. Too fast. I dove into the driver's seat, jammed the key into the ignition, and pleaded out loud. "Come on!" The engine groaned, coughed, then roared to life. In the rear view, they were there, lined across the street, still as statues. The man with the keys raised his hand and waved. The road coiled back through the trees like it wanted to keep me, but I didn't lift my foot off the gas until the hills thinned and my phone buzzed with a single bar. I almost cried when it did. Later, I checked. The map scrolled every inch. Brenner wasn't there. My name's Cale. I didn't have a reason to take the long route. I've done it too many times. This time, I wanted something different, something quiet. So, I punched avoid highways into the GPS and let it do its thing. It gave me a ribbon of back, roads curling through the Appalachian Mountains. And when I say curling, I mean curling. Sharp turns stacked on each other like someone tied the road in knots. No gas stations, no lights, barely any signs, just miles of black top cutting through hills thick with trees. When I started, it was late afternoon, the kind of light that makes everything feel calm. And at first, it was nice. Just me, the hum of the tires and trees, so thick they looked stitched together. No cars, no chatter, no white noise. I felt like I'd driven out of the world. Then I noticed how dark it was getting. One of those quick changes where the day doesn't fade, it just drops. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 6:12 p.m. I kept glancing at it because after a while it was still 6:12. 10 minutes later, same. 20 minutes, same. I laughed at first. I mean, come on. Old car clock glitching out. Not a big deal. But when I checked my phone, it said the same thing. 6:12. And that's when this little prickle went up my neck because, okay, maybe the car clock's busted. But my phone too, weird. I should have turned around. I didn't. I told myself it was some daylight saving bug, or maybe the mountains were messing with GPS time. People post about that stuff online, right? So, I kept going. The gas gauge dropped to half, then a quarter, still no sign of life. Not a porch light hiding between the trees. Not a single mailbox. Just the road folding in on itself over and over, until it felt like I was looping the same mile again and again. Then I saw them. 2 red taillights ahead. Of me. weaving through the curves. I can't even tell you the relief I felt. After an hour of nothing, there was another person out here, proof I wasn't alone. So I sped up. Except the lights didn't get closer. No matter how much I pressed the gas, they stayed the same distance ahead, floating in the dark like they were tethered to me by a string. I pushed harder. Tires squealed. My heart started doing this fast, fluttery thing because it didn't make sense. They weren't speeding away. They were just unreachable. And then they vanished. One blink, they were there. Of the next, gone. I slowed down, crept around the bend with my high beams slicing through the trees. That's when I saw it. A car pulled, over on the shoulder. Same taillights. Dark now. Both doors wide open like whoever had been inside bailed mid-thought. I didn't stop. I didn't even tap the brake. My hands clenched the wheel so tight they ached, and I pressed down on the gas like the road was trying to swallow me whole. That's when the fuel light came on, and now panic was chewing at me because I'd been driving God knows how long and there hadn't been a single town, not even a sign until there was, out of nowhere, like it had been waiting for me. This weathered wooden sign leaned on a post like it had arthritis, white paint peeling, so bad it looked like skin. 2 words barely readable, Gasset Hollow, 2 miles, 2 miles. I could make that. I told myself there'd be something, anything, a store, a pump, a human being. My tank had maybe 10 miles left, tops. So I turned. The road narrowed until the trees were practically pressing their faces against my windows. Branches scraped my mirrors like fingernails. My headlights dug a weak tunnel through the dark, and the GPS stopped talking, which shouldn't have mattered, but somehow did. Then the trees broke, and there it was. What used to be a town maybe 50 years ago. A few buildings hunched together like they were hiding from something. Roofs sagging, windows punched out, siding warped like melted plastic. Not a single light anywhere, but I saw what looked like a gas station, or what was left of one. 2 pumps rusted to the point where they barely looked like pumps. Vines twisting up around them like veins. The sign overhead was stripped bare, nothing left but rusted hooks dangling like teeth. I pulled up and killed the engine. Gravel crunched under my boots when I stepped out, and the sound felt loud, like it didn't belong in the air. I held my phone like some kind of security blanket. Even though it said no service and letters so big, they might as well have said, "You're screwed." The air was heavy. Not just humid, heavy, like it had weight, like it was pressing on my skin. I walked to the station door, or what was left of it. The frame sagged, glass long gone. Inside, shells lay in jagged heaps. The floor was a mess of splintered wood and yellowed paper curling at the edges. A cash register squatted on the counter, keys pried off, drawer ripped out. I turned to go back. Slow steps like moving too fast might wake something up. And then, I saw him. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat of my car. For a second, my brain just stalled like maybe it's a reflection. Maybe it's nothing. But then he moved. Head tilting toward me. Slow, deliberate, like he wanted me to see. The roofline cut his face in half, but I saw his hand. Long fingers, sliding over the wheel, resting like they belonged there. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world felt pinned. Then he smiled. I saw that before anything else, teeth catching the weak glow of my phone, sharp and too white in the dark. I ran. Didn't think, didn't yell, just bolted for the trees. Behind me, my engine roared to life. My engine. Headlights detonated across the clearing, washing the trunks, in gold as I dove into the woods. Branches whipped my arms. Thorns shredded my jeans. I ran until my lungs felt like they were filled with fire, until my throat was raw and still. I kept going because I could hear gravel spraying somewhere behind me, then silence, no headlights, no tires, just the forest swallowing everything. I didn't stop. Not until the ground tilted down and a road unrolled below me. Not the same road, a real one alive with cars sliding past like silver fish. I stumbled out, waving like a lunatic. A sedan slowed and this woman leaned out, her face creased with worry. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded because the truth was too heavy to explain. She drove me to the next town. I didn't go back for the car that night. I'd taken 2 weeks off work. No specific reason, just that nagging, restless itch that makes you want to disappear into the woods for a bit and ignore all the emails. I loaded up my Forester with the usual camping gear: tent, stove, water filter, first aid kit, all the essentials. The plan was to drive a winding, mostly aimless route from Hollow Creek to Redbury, taking whichever side roads looked interesting and hiking trails that barely registered on maps. I had no reservations, no schedule, just a vague idea of moving northeast through the mountains, camping wherever I could, and steering clear of cities entirely. I'd done a dozen trips like this before, always solo. I liked the quiet, and until this one, nothing weird had ever happened. At worst, I'd had flat tires or unexpected rain. This time, though, I craved something a little more off the radar, something people didn't post about in Instagram reels. So I started digging through old hiking forums and obscure subreddits, searching for routes that didn't get mentioned in guidebooks. That's how I found it. It was a thread from about 5 years ago. Barely any activity. One post caught my eye, titled "Scenic but Sketchy." The guy who wrote it used a username I couldn't place. Just a random string of words and numbers. No profile picture, no other posts. But the directions felt authentic. It wasn't a story. It was a list of turn-by-turn instructions with notes like, "Third left after the school with the boarded windows. Look for a mailbox painted blue. No house. Nearby. And finally, if you see the boy in the road twice, turn back. You missed it." That last line sounded like a joke, but something about the detail, the tone, it just stuck with me. I screenshotted it. Figured maybe I'd check it out if I had time. 3 days into the trip, I did. I had just come down through Lantern Ridge and was heading toward an unmarked service road when I decided to follow the scenic but sketchy route. I pulled over, reread the steps, and made the turn off the main road. Gravel crunched under the tires. The air felt different right away. At first, it was just odd, things that could be explained. A collapsed motel covered in kudzu, a church, with all the windows bricked up from the inside. I stopped to take a picture of the church, but the photo came out blurry. I checked the lens, wiped it, tried again. Same result. I remember thinking, okay, that's weird, but not weird enough to turn around. The final step on the forum was a sharp left past a green silo. I found it, made the turn, and maybe a minute later, my GPS froze. Not the usual spinning wheel. The whole screen just locked, then went black. A few seconds later, in red letters, it flashed "recalibrating." I waited, expecting it to restart. It didn't. The word kept flashing. I turned it off, back on. Nothing. Same screen. I've never seen that message before or since. Still, I figured I'd backtrack if things got too weird. But when I looked behind me, the road didn't look familiar. The curves were sharper. The trees seemed closer, almost like they'd followed me. Even the light looked dimmer, and it wasn't near sunset. Then the gravel changed. I noticed it slowly. It had a violet tint, like bruised stone. No idea what kind of rock that was. I kept going, more curious than nervous at that point. Eventually, I passed a gutted truck. No tires, hood ripped off, cab rusted through. Next to it was a pile of antlers, at least 30, maybe more, stacked neatly like someone was storing firewood. And also, a blue mailbox, just like the post said, no house in sight. I didn't stop. Then I saw the man. He was standing right in the middle of the road, next to a freshly killed deer. He wore faded overalls and was holding a funnel in one hand, as if he'd been filling something or was about to. His face was streaked with grey, like ash, and in his other hand was a crumpled paper map. A pickup truck idled behind him, engine humming like it had just been started. Facing me, I slowed down, expecting him to wave, say something, maybe ask for help. But he didn't look up, didn't move, just stood there, staring at the funnel like he'd forgotten what it was. I drove around him slowly, careful not to hit the deer. I didn't look back. From there, the road narrowed. The branches grew so close they scraped the car. My mirrors brushed leaves. I turned off the music because it felt wrong to hear anything man-made. That's when the fog started. Not regular fog. This came in low, sliding out from the woods like it was being pushed. Dense, wet, too heavy for the breeze to move. It clung to the road in thick waves. Up ahead, I saw a bus stop, just an old bench with a rusted overhang. A girl was sitting there. She had her knees pulled up, face buried in her arms, her red dress soaked through. I slowed, thinking maybe she was hurt. As I passed, she turned her head. Her eyes were wide, clouded over. Her face pressed up to the glass like she'd been waiting for something that never arrived. She didn't blink. I didn't stop. That stretch of road felt endless. No turns, no signs, just miles of that weird fog. My phone stayed dead. Then finally, a break. Another car ahead. Same color, same shape. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Then I noticed the rear fender. Deep, crescent-shaped dent, same place as mine. A long scratch that I'd put there backing into a cart corral months ago. I floored it. The car turned ahead of me. When I rounded the bend, it was gone. No sign of it. Just a wooden sign hanging from a chain-link fence. Retreat. I didn't. A while later, the road forked. No signs, no pavement, just two dirt paths. I chose the one with fresher tire marks. That's when the gas light came on. I hadn't been paying attention. The tank was nearly empty. I coasted along, half panicking, until I saw a gas station ahead. Small, squat building with a rusted metal canopy. The sign on the door said, "Closed Sunday." It was Tuesday, but the lights were on. I got out. The air felt too still, like the world was holding its breath. I walked up to the glass. Everything inside was pristine, not clean, untouched. The shelves were stocked as if it were the first day of business. A man stood behind the counter, hand on the register, motionless. He didn't look at me when I knocked, didn't blink, didn't breathe. I backed away slowly and got back in the car. For some reason, I picked up my phone. I didn't expect anything, but the screen lit up. One message, no name, no number. "You're nearly here." I dropped it in the seat and didn't touch it again. A few minutes later, I passed through a rusted gate. Beyond it, the road climbed steeply. At the top was a clearing, and in the middle of that clearing was my car. Same dents, same gear in the back, engine running, driver's door open as if I'd just stepped out. I slammed on the brakes. I blinked and it was gone. No skid marks, no sound, just gone. I sat there frozen, hands white on the wheel. Then I threw the car in reverse and backed down the hill until I hit the gate. I turned around and followed the road until I finally saw a real highway sign, paved asphalt, a town name I recognized. I made it to a gas station in Leon Hollow. I filled up with shaking hands, sat in the car for a long time. When I finally checked the hiking forum again, the post was gone. User deleted. No cache, no archive, like it was never there. I still do road trips, but only with someone else in the passenger seat, and I never go near that part of the range. The drive from Charleston to Knoxville isn't anything remarkable. Just a long stretch of highway with a few hills, some forgettable exits, and enough gas stations with bad coffee to keep your eyelids from collapsing. I'd done it before, twice, actually, and both times had gone off without a hitch. So I didn't think twice when I threw my duffel in the back seat, topped off the tank, and hit the road just after noon. The GPS lit up, I picked a podcast, and that was that. I didn't bother checking the route. No reason to. I'd driven it, trusted it. It's not like Google suddenly forgets where Tennessee is. About 2 hours in, somewhere past Beckley, the signal cut out, not dropped, cut 1 second. Music was playing, the little map arrow crawling along like usual. Then just dead silence. No static, no buffer, just gone. I looked at the screen. Blank. No data. The icon had frozen somewhere in a patch of green. Nothing. Still, I didn't panic. Mountain roads eat signals for breakfast. It happens. You lose GPS for a mile, maybe 2, then it comes back and acts like nothing happened. I figured I'd drive a few more minutes, pop out of the valley, and it'd reconnect. Instead, the road got weird. Not suddenly, gradually. The kind of thing you don't notice until you're squinting at it, wondering when it stopped looking normal. The shoulder disappeared first, just a slow fade into gravel and leaves. Then the painted lines, center, edge markings. Those started to break up. Before long, I was riding a narrow, twisting ribbon of cracked pavement with nothing but trees pressing in tight on either side. I figured maybe I'd missed a turn near Oak Hill. That could happen. It didn't seem right, but I'd been distracted fiddling with the Bluetooth connection. Still, there hadn't been any obvious forks, just a gentle bend that seemed to keep going, tighter than I remembered, curling down into darker woods. Then the road dipped. I mean, really dipped, like I was sliding into some forgotten gorge. No houses, no cars, just the kind of wilderness you usually see from a hiking trail, not a driver's seat. The weird part, I didn't remember passing any signs. No towns, no intersections, nothing that explained how I ended up there. I almost turned around. Then around a tight corner, I saw it. A gas station slumped against the hillside like it had been dropped there decades ago and never got back up. One lonely pump out front rusted to hell. The canopy above it sagged to one side, held up by what looked like 2 different poles. The windows were blacked out, and I couldn't tell if it was tinted glass or just filth. The sign above the door said Gattis in faded, flaking paint. I pulled in. I didn't need gas. The gauge still sat above half. I just needed to stop moving, figure out where I was, maybe ask directions, if anyone was even inside. The pump was ancient, one of those old mechanical dials that clicked and spun when gas flowed. Except this one looked permanently frozen. No card reader, no keypad, just rust. I walked up to the store. The door creaked but didn't trigger a bell. There was a dusty hook where the bell should have been, just swaying slightly. The inside felt wrong. Not scary, just stagnant, like the place had been sealed off and time forgot about it. The air was weirdly warm, thick almost. Nothing on the shelves had price tags. Some of the boxes were so sun-bleached, I couldn't read them. "Hello," I called out. "Nothing." I took another step in, and that's when he appeared. A man stepped out from behind a shelf. No sound, no warning, just there. His clothes looked like something out of an old catalogue. Tan jacket zipped all the way up, faded jeans, plain black baseball cap with no logo. The kind of outfit that could belong to 100 different people, yet somehow didn't feel like it belonged to anyone at all. His eyes didn't land on me. Not fully. They drifted just slightly off, like I was standing an inch to the left of where he expected. "You lost?" he asked, voice flat and even. I said, "Yeah, I was headed to Knoxville and must have taken a wrong turn." He nodded once and gestured vaguely toward the road behind me. "Don't take the Ridge Road," he said. Now, here's the thing. I hadn't mentioned a ridge. I asked him how to get back on track. He didn't give directions in any normal way. No route numbers, no highway names. Just look for the split tree. Take a left there. "What does it look like?" I asked. He gave me a look like I'd asked what color the sky was. "You'll know." That's all he said. Back in the car, I sat there a moment debating whether to listen. Part of me wanted to turn around, get back to a main road, retrace every step. But another part, stubborn, tired, maybe just a little too curious, decided to drive ahead. I found the tree. He was right. There was no mistaking it. It stood half on the shoulder, roots straddling the ditch like claws. The trunk had split open from top to bottom, as if something had burst out of it. Black scorch marks crawled up the bark, but somehow the branches were full, green, alive. It didn't make sense. I took the left. The road narrowed even more. It dipped again, then again. Old houses appeared here and there. Half-roofed cabins, broken trailers, front porches clinging to one last nail. One had "no trespassing" scrolled directly across the siding in what looked like spray paint over bullet holes. I passed a church with boarded-up windows and deep gashes in the door, like something had tried to rip it off its hinges. But I kept driving. I told myself this was just rural country, isolated, maybe a little rougher than I was used to, nothing more. Then came the signs, not road signs. These were pieces of wood nailed to trees, some painted, some written with marker or charcoal. A few had Bible verses. One just said, "Turn back." Another was written in a language I couldn't place. The last one was just a red handprint with a nail punched straight through the palm. I didn't stop to look closer. Eventually, the pavement came back, but it wasn't right. The paint was crooked, hand-done. The lines were uneven, like someone tried to recreate a real road from memory and didn't quite get it right. Then I saw the truck. A white pickup parked on the side of the road. No plates, no markings, just a dirty tarp tied down over the bed. No one inside. 5 minutes later, I passed it again. Same dent, same crack in the tail light, same spot of flattened grass. I pulled over, turned off the car, sat still. The woods were dense, but not quiet. I heard movement, something stepping through dry leaves. Quick, light, stopping and starting, like it didn't want to be heard, but didn't quite care enough to hide completely. Then I caught it in the rearview mirror, a face just barely visible, not angry, not smiling, just watching. I turned around, nothing there. I didn't wait, started the engine, got moving again. Didn't care where it led. The road wound tighter, trees pulled closer. The light was fading fast. I checked the fuel, blinking red. I hadn't gone far enough for that. Then I saw the sign. Crooked wooden, board nailed to a splintered post. "Welcome back." That's all it said. Hadn't been there before. No turns, no forks. The road hadn't looped, but the truck showed up again. Same dents, same tarp. This time, it was on the other side of the road. I didn't stop. Eventually, the force pulled away. The road widened. Streetlights blinked on ahead. And just like that, I was out. A normal gas station stood at the edge of the road, bright, clean. 2 working trucks parked at the pumps. Actual logos, real plates. I pulled in, nearly shaking. Inside, the guy at the register looked up, then did a double take. "Where did you come from?" he asked. I told him I came through a split tree on a ridge road. He went still. "There's no road out there anymore," he said. "Washed out a long time ago." I filled up, drove straight to Knoxville. No detours, no stops. When I got there, I checked the mileage. I'd burned through more than I should have, at least half a tank extra, and I was nearly 2 hours late. No missed calls, no texts, no one noticed. I've searched maps, forums, satellite images, nothing. No gutters, no ridge road, no trace of any of it. Now I take the long way every single time. I was 20 when I decided I had to get out of the city for a while. I'd been juggling night classes, a miserable part-time job, and this roommate who thought blasting dubstep at 2 a.m. counted as stress relief. I needed quiet space. So I planned a solo trip. Nate was supposed to come. We talked about it for weeks, but the day before we were supposed to leave, he texted some vague excuse. His girlfriend's cousin had some emergency at the hospital. Something vague and dramatic. I didn't buy it. Pretty sure he just chickened out. He always had a thing about open wilderness vibes, whatever that meant. I didn't care. I packed up my one Honda with the basics, granola bars, a few apples, a 5-gallon jug of water, some matches, That old beat-up tent I'd found in our storage closet, and this rusting Swiss Army knife I'd only used for opening Amazon boxes. I pointed my GPS toward the Appalachian backroads and figured I'd find peace somewhere out there. First day was just driving. Boring, straight highways, familiar exits, places I'd passed on family road trips. I stopped at a Waffle House, listened to a true crime podcast, and slept in the car at a rest stop. Felt fine. By day 3, I'd left all that behind. 30 miles off Route 26, somewhere near a dying town called Stone Hollow. You wouldn't find it on a tourist map. The 2-lane road I followed started cracking, then dipped into gravel so sharp it made my steering wheel rattle. It felt like I was driving into a forgotten pocket of the state. Every few miles there'd be another house. Well, what was left of one. Roofs caved in, porches falling, cars rusting into the dirt. I passed one with a busted camper in the driveway and a God is watching sign nailed crooked to the barn. No one waved. No one moved. Just stillness. Then there was this woman. She was standing alone in a field next to an old fence swallowed by weeds, wearing a tattered coat, holding a shovel as if she'd been digging for hours. She didn't wave, didn't blink, just watched my car roll by like she was trying to memorize the plates. I told myself it was nothing, just someone working their land. But there was something about how she didn't even pretend not to stare. Still, I kept going. I told myself the whole point of this trip was to get away from everything, right? Be alone. Disconnect. That night, I pulled off into a clearing I spotted between 2 mossy trees. It looked like it had been used by hunters or campers a long time ago, flat enough to pitch a tent, a few blackened rocks where someone had built a fire once. No signs, no other cars, no signal on my phone. I set up the tent, boiled water for instant noodles, and sat there, watching the steam curl up while the trees closed in around me. It was quiet, not silent. Bugs buzzing, leaves shifting. But quiet in a way that felt full, if that makes sense, like the woods were listening. Then around 11 I heard it. I thought maybe I imagined it. Could have been a branch falling or a woodpecker or whatever, but it was specific. One knock, metal on wood, sharp, echoed. I sat still. 30 seconds later, another knock, closer. Then again, knock. 3 in total. Same timing, same force. I didn't move, didn't unzip the tent. Just reached for the knife I'd left by my boots and held it. Blade down, gripping it way too hard. My heart was hammering so loud it felt like it might attract attention. I didn't hear footsteps. No rustling leaves, just the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're being watched. Nothing else happened. Eventually, I must have passed out. I don't remember sleeping, just blinking, and suddenly it was light. I unzipped the tent, stepped outside, expecting, I don't know, something, signs. But everything looked untouched. No tracks, no messed up gear, no broken branches. I packed up fast and got back on the road, bouncing over gravel until I hit a patch of half-dead pavement that eventually led to a small gas station near the edge of some nowhere town. The place looked like it hadn't had a delivery truck in months. Windows were cloudy, and the pump clicked a few times before the numbers moved. I went inside, grabbed a soda and a protein bar, and asked the cashier about hiking trails. He looked up once, then stared back at the register. "You want west?" he said. "Rip Loop trails out that way. Don't go east." I asked what was east. He just kind of shrugged without shrugging, didn't lift his head, didn't make eye contact. "They don't like strangers over there." I paused. "Who's they?" Another shrug. This time he tapped the register key like the conversation was over. I left. Didn't want to know. Took his advice and drove west until I found the River Loop trailhead. There was a map posted near the entrance. Faded, kind of water damaged, but it matched what my phone said before I lost signal. Seemed safe enough. I parked, strapped on my backpack, and started walking. The trail was easy at first. Gentle incline, mile markers, birds calling overhead. 2 hours in, I'd seen a few squirrels. Nothing major. I was starting to relax again when I noticed the trail markers had changed. Originally, the trees had been tagged with orange plastic. Bright, clean, hard to miss. But now, there were blue ribbons tied in their place. Fabric ones. They looked older, faded, and they curved off the trail at an angle I didn't remember seeing on the map. I paused, debated turning back, but I figured maybe it was a side loop. Maybe a ranger set up a detour or something. Curiosity got the better of me. I followed the ribbons, ducking under branches that suddenly felt a little too low, like the path didn't really want to be followed. And then the birds went silent, just gone. Not a flutter, not a chirp. Even the bugs went quiet. The air felt wrong, like the sound had been sucked out of it. I slowed down, watched each step. Then the ribbons changed again. White now, cloth, dirty, knotted the same way each time, like whoever tied them was in a hurry, but methodical. They led deeper until the trees opened into a small clearing. In the middle was this structure. Logs stacked like Lincoln logs forming a square about 6 ft high, open in the center. It looked too deliberate to be random, but too rough to be official. Inside was a single wooden chair. Thin legs, brittle looking. On the seat was a pile of what looked like blankets and maybe a jacket. All stained, shaped like someone had just slumped forward and never moved again. I didn't want to get closer, but I did, maybe 5 steps before I stopped cold. That's when I heard a twig snap behind me. I turned around fast. Nothing, just trees. I turned back and he was there standing beside the wooden structure like he'd always been there. I didn't hear him approach, didn't hear a breath. He wore a coat made from scraps, stitched together patches of different colors and materials. One eye swollen shut, the other staring straight at me with this weird stillness, like he wasn't looking at me, but through me. I didn't scream, didn't run. I just started backing away, slow, careful, never took my eyes off him. When the trees finally thinned and I saw the glint of my car windshield through the branches, I almost cried. That night, I found a roadside motel, looked like it had been last renovated during the Cold War. Flickering neon sign, peeling paint, buzz from the overhead lights. I didn't care. I paid cash, locked the door, deadbolt, chain, everything. Collapsed onto the bed with my phone open next to me like that would somehow help. Around midnight, there was a knock, rhythmic, measured at my door. I held my breath, tiptoed to the peephole. Nothing, just the hallway, empty, buzzing fluorescents and stained carpet. I didn't sleep, not really. At first light, I left. No shower, no breakfast. I drove straight through to Asheville, didn't look back, thought that was the end of it. But a week later, while unpacking my bag in the living room, I opened the outer pocket. There it was. White ribbon, same fabric, same knot. I never put it there. No idea how it got there. I tell people I burned it, but honestly, I don't know. The memory's fuzzy. I sold the tent. Haven't been camping since. Haven't been back to the mountains. My name's Nate, and last fall, I did something really stupid. I took a solo road trip through the Appalachian backroads. I just finished a kitchen remodel in Charleston. It took way longer than it should have, and I was exhausted. My brain felt like scrambled eggs. So, I thought, let's unplug. I grabbed the truck, threw a duffel bag over the passenger seat, tossed my toolbox in the back, and said, screw it. No schedule, no bookings, just drive. Until I didn't feel like it anymore. I figured maybe I'd find some quiet diner, a chipped coffee cup, a slice of pie, the usual escape route. Somewhere past a place called Laurel Ridge, I saw it. This old, leaning green highway sign that looked like it might have been dropped in a junkyard and forgotten. Glover's Hollow, 6 miles. The letters were barely hanging on, faded, grubby. Glover's Hollow. It sounded friendly enough, or at least interesting. I thought, why not? I didn't hesitate. I took the exit. Within seconds, the smooth road ended. The truck dipped down and the pavement disappeared under cracked gravel. By the time I realized it was dirt, I'd already crested a shallow hill. The road wound tighter, narrower. The trees grew so close I could have leaned out the window and touched bark. Leaves and acorns crunched under my tires like I was driving over a discarded Halloween candy stash. I kept expecting the road to open up for something normal to appear, but it didn't. My phone signal dropped miles back. I couldn't even see a break in the trees. I started second-guessing myself, but then spotted something on the right. About 3 miles in, a small cabin came into view. It looked like it had been built sideways, leaning as if it couldn't decide which direction it wanted to go. One of its windows was sealed with a black trash bag, duct taped around the edges. On the porch rail, someone had nailed a sign that read Cedar House. I passed it, saw another cabin further along, Elm House. This one had a rocking chair tilted just off the front porch. Shutters closed tight. No people, no driveway, just trees. Silent, looming trees. Now, I was curious, a little spooked, but mostly curious. I told myself I'd go another mile, maybe 2, then turn around and call it a day. Then the truck started to feel weird, draggy, like it was pushing through gravel soup. Not overheating. Nothing felt obviously wrong, just resistance. Slower steering. I slowed down to a crawl, and that's when I noticed off to the side a clearing. In the clearing was a little general store, leaning, dusty, slouched like everything else out here. The front window had a long crack running across it. Inside, I saw a flyer taped to the glass. County Fair, 1987. The open sign was a piece of cardboard with the words sloppily written in pencil. The front door was cracked open, held in place by a chunk of firewood. Something about it felt dead quiet. I got out, boots crunching over loose stones. Leaves rustled behind me. When I spun around, nothing there, just trees, wide and quiet. I pushed the door. No chime. That old brass bell was gone. Inside smelled like a gym locker left sealed for months. Musty paper, mold that hit the back of your throat. Underneath, a sour tinge like leftover vinegar from spilled pickles. Shelves sagged under dusty cans. Some I couldn't even guess what was inside. Behind the counter, an old man sat on a creaky stool, staring at a flickering black and white TV. It was static, pure static, and it wasn't even plugged into a real socket. The cord dangled from the wall, yankable like a prank. I cleared my throat. "You open?" He stayed hunched, then said, "Didn't see your tag. You a guest?" I told him I was passing through. He shifted slow, looked up, and his eyes weren't right. Cloudy film over them like cataracts. But he stared, focused. His gaze didn't flinch. "Guests don't pass through," he said flat. "They stay." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It sounded like he was messing with me. He didn't show a trace of humor, just static echoing off the walls. "I need gas," I said. He jerked his head toward the back. "Pumps out there, hand crank, cash." "Only." I pulled out a 20 and left it on the counter. No reaction, nothing. Outside. That pump looked antique, like from a museum. I gave it a crank. The handle ground, moaned. By the time I felt my shoulder burning, I had about a third of a tank. Enough to get me out, I hoped. As I walked back, I looked through the window. The bell was gone, the door shut tight. TV still, lit with static. The man gone, just the stool. I climbed in and turned the key. The truck felt lighter. Steering was normal. It didn't swerve or stall. It just moved. I followed the path I came in on, ready to abandon this whole thing. A few minutes later, I passed Cedar House again, then Elm House. Only now, their curtains were drawn tight, like someone didn't want me to see inside. Doors were shut. No porch chairs, just more strangeness. I hit the gas. The road wound the exact same way. Potholes lined up just as before. Suddenly, I crested a tiny rise and suddenly I was back in that clearing. Same pump, same store, same cracked window. The door was wide open this time, and loud static, so loud it rattled the glass. I didn't hesitate. I slammed reverse and tore, back down the loop, passing the cabins again. This time, their doors were cracked open, just a sliver, like someone ducked out for a second and forgot to close them. I didn't want to look inside. I just wanted out. Another loop. This time I saw movement. Figures behind the glass, silent, still pressing to look out. On the next pass, there were kids. 3 of them sitting on the porch of Elm House, legs dangling, no expression, just watching as I drove by. My voice came out like a yelp. Not a full scream, but my throat tightened in the strangest way, like I had no idea this could happen to me. I didn't slow. The truck bounced through the trees, branches scraping like they were reaching for me. Then the truck popped onto smooth pavement. It was sudden. No transition. No, here's the end. Just open road. Painted lines wide enough for 2 lanes. My phone pinged. Signal. I felt foolish sore from gripping the wheel so tight. My heart was pounding like I'd run a mile. I didn't stop. Not at first. 20 straight minutes. No stopping. My hands felt stiff. I swore I saw movement. In the rearview mirror, something flashed between trees, but I wasn't slowing. Then I saw a gas station. Real lights, clean pumps, a convenience store with everything you expect. Coke machines, that synthetic music over the speakers, a clerk behind the counter, eyes glued to his phone. I walked in without looking at him. "Hey," I said, my voice. "You ever hear of Glover's Hollow?" He looked up slow, no surprise, said, "That place don't exist." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He rubbed his chin. "Used to be a tiny hollow out that way. Real private place. Folks kind of dropped off the map in the 60s. Some say mines collapsed. Others say water contamination. Some say people just turned on each other." He gave me this hard look like sizing up bad news. Then he quieted and asked, "You didn't stop, did you?" I didn't say anything. I just walked out, got back in the truck, and left. And I haven't taken a side road since. The whole trip was Mason's idea. He'd been hyping it for weeks, sending us links to blog posts about hidden Appalachian gems, photos of old wooden bridges, screenshots of winding mountain roads. Honestly, I didn't even hesitate before saying yes. I'd been stuck in a routine that felt like beige wallpaper. This sounded like a reset button. We loaded up Eric's Honda Civic, a car that looked like it had barely survived college, and crammed the trunk with a cooler of gas station snacks and cheap beer. That was the plan. No big expectations. Just get out there and see what happens. The start was perfect. The sky was wide open, mountains rolling like a watercolor painting. Valleys so vast they made you feel small in a good way. Every turn offered a view worthy of a postcard. For the first 100 miles, I didn't even mind that my phone showed no service, like a warning light. Eric sat in the passenger seat, telling jokes so bad they looped back around to funny. Mason kept switching playlists, trying to set the perfect road trip mood. For a while, I thought, this is it. This is exactly what I needed. By early afternoon, the mood shifted. We'd gone way off the main highway thanks to Mason. He insisted the GPS was leading us to tourist traps and that the real beauty was on the roads nobody talks about. At first, I believed him. Then, the asphalt started looking less like a road and more like a suggestion. Cracks split across it like veins, and the center lines faded to ghostly streaks. Tree branches dipped lower, tangling together overhead, like the woods were leaning in for a closer look. "This doesn't even look like a road anymore," Eric muttered. His voice had that edge, the one that means the joke's over. He wasn't wrong. It felt wrong. My phone had no bars. Mason's had died an hour ago, and Eric's GPS locked up before flashing to some glitchy static screen and quitting. We kept going because what else could we do? No pull-offs, no safe place to turn around. The ditch on either side looked hungry. and the idea of backing up that whole way blind. Forget it. So I told myself it was just a detour, a story for later, but then I noticed the trees. At first it didn't register, just this feeling, an itch in my brain like something was off. Then I slowed for a tight curve and saw it. Every tree along the road had been marked, not chopped down, but cut, deep, angled slashes carved into the bark at chest height, all slanting the same way. Not random damage, deliberate. Every single one facing the road. Trail markers? Eric leaned closer to his window, squinting. For what? Mason said from the back. There's no trail here. He was right. Nothing but an unbroken wall of trees on both sides. And those marks, they weren't hiker scratches. They were too uniform, too neat. Someone had walked this entire stretch with a blade and a purpose. Nobody said much after that. The road squeezed tighter, like the forest was trying to swallow it whole. Branches scraped the roof and clawed at the sides of the car, a dry, screeching sound that made my jaw ache. I rolled the windows up, but it didn't stop the noise. Then, like someone flipped a switch, the pavement ended. No warning, just dirt and weeds swallowing the tires. Up ahead, a sign leaned crooked. In the brush, its paint peeled down to bare wood in places. One word still readable in flaking black letters. Marrow. None of us had heard of it. Probably a ghost town. Mason said he was aiming for casual, but his laugh sounded wrong. Thin and sharp. Could be cool to check out. I should have turned the car around. I should have scraped it up in the trees and gotten us out of there. But the road was too narrow, and the thought of reversing that whole winding stretch blind made my stomach twist. So, I drove on, because what else was there to do? The dirt roads spilled us into something that might have once been a town square. 4, maybe 5 buildings sagged around an open patch of ground like they've been holding their breath for decades. The biggest one still had a sign hanging by a single rusted chain. Marrow General. Its windows were nothing but black holes. The others weren't much better. Roofs collapsing in slow motion, porches caving like soft bones. "This is sick," Eric said, already unbuckling. His boots hit the dirt before I could respond. "Wait," I called after him, trying to sound calm and failing. Look, the ground was soft from old rain, muddy enough to hold impressions. Footprints, dozens of them, not scattered, organized, all heading in the same direction toward the buildings, every single one pointing in, none leading out. "Guys," I said, my throat dry. "We need to leave now." They didn't listen. Mason was already grinning, swinging his door open. 2 minutes, he said. "You'll live." Then they were gone, boots crunching toward the general store. The door didn't even creak when Mason pushed it open. It just swung wide like it had been waiting for them. I stayed in the car. My hands were glued to the steering wheel, knuckles white. I kept flicking my eyes between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. That's when I saw it. Movement between the trees, maybe 30 FT back. Something pale slipping from trunk to trunk. Then another shape farther down. Too quick to get a good look, but definitely there. My pulse went haywire. I cracked the window an inch and yelled, "Eric, Mason, now, just silence." I climbed out. My legs felt rubbery, like they might fold if I moved too fast. I took one step toward the store when I heard it. A sound I can still hear if I close my eyes. Wet. Slow. A chewing noise like teeth tearing through raw meat. It came from the woods behind me. I turned. Shapes stepped out of the tree line. Not people, not anything I knew. Their limbs were too long, joints bending in ways that made my stomach drop. Their skin was pale, stretched too thin, almost grey, like paper left in the sun too long. Where faces should have been were pits, and the mouths, God, torn too wide, stuffed with teeth that didn't belong there. They didn't rush. They didn't have to. They just drifted closer, slow and certain, like they already knew how this ended. I ran for the store. Inside was worse. The smell hit me first, heavy and rotten. thick enough to coat my throat. Shelves sagged under jars filled with things I didn't want to identify. Dark shapes floating in syrup the color of old blood. But that wasn't what froze me. It was the back wall. It wasn't wood. It was skin stretched tight, nailed across beams, like canvas. Words carved into it, deep and uneven, still wet in places. I didn't read them. I couldn't. Eric appeared at my side, whispering, "We have to go." His face looked wrong, like it had been drained of color. The chewing sound was inside now. I didn't look for the source. I grabbed Eric's arms, screamed for Mason, and bolted. We tore across the dirt. Mason came out of nowhere, sprinting full tilt, eyes wild. He dove into the back seat just as something grey and long-fingered scraped the door. I didn't check the mirror. I didn't breathe. I slammed the gear into drive and floored it. Trees whipped past, dirt spraying like smoke. When the pavement finally reappeared under the tires, I could have cried. But I didn't stop until I saw lights. A gas station glowing like heaven on the county line. I was 31 when we took a detour off Route 19. Colton was driving, exactly as he always did. Elbow out the window, sunglasses on even though the sun was barely up, like he was auditioning for a road trip movie. We'd left Pittsburgh early that morning, aiming for Asheville. No reservations, no strict timeline, just the idea of a 2-day drive with plenty of stops, maybe some antique shops, a waterfall or two if we felt like it. It was supposed to be low stress, but Colton didn't believe in supposed to. Plans were just suggestions to him. Sometime that afternoon, he turned to me and said, "You ever wonder what the old roads know that the new ones forgot?" I laughed. "That's what you're going with?" He just grinned. "Trust me, they're better." He swerved off the highway just outside, a town called Ellen. I remember seeing a closed-down diner half collapsed in a barn right before we left the main road. I didn't object. I figured we had time, and maybe we'd stumble onto something cool, a local festival, maybe a weird roadside attraction. Worst case, we hit a dead end and turned back. A few miles in, the GPS stopped working. Just froze, like it had lost its mind. We tried a couple of different mapping apps, but it was the same issue. No service, no map updates, just blank screens. I kept watching the trees as they grew thicker and closer to the road edge. Pines mostly. The sun started breaking through, in thin strips, making the whole road feel like we were driving through the ribs of something alive. Then the road narrowed. First gravel, then patchy dirt. We bumped along for another half mile before I saw the sign, burned into a crooked plank of wood, nailed to a bent metal post. Nellis Ridge. The name meant nothing to me, but Colton immediately sat up straighter. "This is it," he said, tapping the sign if it proved something. "My uncle used to talk about this place." "Used to?" He said a little quieter, then added, "Before the dementia, but he always came back to the story. Said there was a town back here, real hidden. Said they buried the roads to keep outsiders out. It sounded like the kind of thing you'd make up to scare kids at a campfire." Still, I couldn't help but feel curious and maybe a little uneasy. The road got rougher after that. Not like potholes, more like it didn't want to be driven on. It felt less like we were driving and more like we were being funneled. Then the van dipped. No noise, no warning, just a soft drop, like the ground underneath one of the front wheels had given up. Colton swore and pulled us to the side of the road. We both got out. The tire wasn't flat. It wasn't muddy, but it had sunk into the dirt, maybe 6 inches, cleanly, like someone had cut a hole and set the wheel inside. The ground around it was dry and cracked like it hadn't seen rain in years. Colton tried reversing. Nothing. No spin, no noise, just stuck. I started scanning the woods for something to wedge under the tire. Flat stones, fallen branches, anything. That's when I spotted the fence. Low and rusty, mostly swallowed by ivy, maybe 15 yards off the road. Fast. It led to a clearing, not just trees. Rows. Neat rows of stone markers. I stepped toward it, more curious than cautious. The place looked old, but it wasn't overgrown. The grass was short. The stones weren't tipped or cracked. And right in the center was this table, wooden, wide, worn but solid. Around it was a perfect circle of mason jars. When Colton caught up, he stared at them the same way I was. "What is this?" We stepped over the sagging wire. The jars were sealed with deep red wax, thick like candle drippings. Each one held something: a bundle of feathers, a rolled scrap of cloth, coins, a broken wristwatch floating in dark syrupy liquid. One had a row of tiny teeth. The longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. The air wasn't colder exactly, but heavier, like it was waiting. The gravestones didn't have names, just dates. Some went back to the mid-1800s. One marker stood out, bigger, smoother. The carving read, April 3rd, 1912. We kept them company. Now they returned the favor. Colton read it aloud, then stared back at the jars. "These aren't for the dead," he said. "They're for the living." I didn't know what he meant, and I didn't want to ask. We turned to go back to the van, and the road was gone. Gone. Not blocked, not hidden, just replaced. Where the van should have been was now a wall of trees, thick trunks, knotted branches, no break. Colton walked straight into the brush, pushing at it. Nothing budged, like the forest was welded shut. "This isn't how we came in," he kept saying. We didn't turn. I checked my phone again. Still dead. I opened the compass app out of habit. The needle spun in place, then locked in the wrong direction. Then we heard it. Footsteps. Slow, rhythmic, crunching through the leaves like someone walking barefoot on purpose. Not animals, not random, measured. We spun around. "We need to move," I said. So we did. We started walking, hugging the tree line, looking for anything. Another road, a break, a trail. But the woods just kept stretching. After maybe 20 minutes, we stumbled into another clearing, another fence, another table, another circle of jars. But these weren't like the others. These were personal. One held hair. One had half of a burned photo. Another had a rusted spoon, and what looked like a lock of braided string. And one jar had fabric, black, with a white print on it. I stared at it. Colton's t-shirt. The sleeve had ripped the day before when we were loading the cooler into the van. He reached for it. The wax cracked, and the woods seemed to exhale like something big had been holding its breath. Then came a voice right behind us. "You came late this year." I turned. No one. Colton didn't flinch. He just stood there, frozen, staring at the jar. I grabbed his wrist hard. "We have to go right now," I insisted. He moved like his bones didn't want to bend, but he followed when I pulled. We ran. I had no plan, no direction, just away. The woods twisted around us like they were folding in on themselves. Every time I thought we'd gotten somewhere, we circled back. We passed the same tree, a dead pine, a spiral carved deep into the bark. We weren't walking, we were being spun. Then we hit water, a stream wide and fast, too wide to cross without risking one of us slipping. And across it, another clearing, another fence, another circle of jars. We hadn't escaped. We'd been placed. That's when Colton spoke again, whispering as if someone might overhear. "He made jars," he said. "Said they kept her brothers safe when they went into the mines. Said if they got lost down there, she could call them back." I turned to him. "Who told you that?" "My uncle," he said. "Same one who talked about this place. Said the whole ridge collapsed in the 20th century, but not from digging. Said it folded like a shirt pocket turned inside out." Around her, I asked, "Who is she?" He looked past me. I turned. She was standing at the table. Not walking, not moving, just there. A woman or the shape of one. Long grey dress. No face I could make out. Arms limp at her sides. She lifted a hand, and then she was 10 feet closer. I wait to blink again. I grabbed Colton and ran. I don't know where. I didn't care. At some point, the trees snapped back into place like a curtain dropping. And there it was. The road. The van. Exactly as we left it. We didn't speak. I pulled him past it up the incline as fast as he could move. At the top of the hill, we saw a sign, half swallowed by vines. Route 19, 6 miles. We didn't stop walking until we hit the highway. We flagged down a state trooper who looked at us like we were the ones who'd been buried. They found the van. Same place. But the roads leading to that spot, none of them matched our memory. Last summer, I hit a point where everything in my life felt like it had frozen in place. Same job, same coffee order, same commute, same loop of podcasts that hadn't been funny in months. I was tired all the time, but it wasn't the kind of tired sleep could fix. It was the kind of tired where you stare at your own reflection and think, who exactly gave you permission to become this person? So, I packed up my car. No dramatic send-off. I just grabbed my old tent, a musty sleeping bag that smelled like a thrift store basement, tossed together some snacks, and hit the road. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't know myself. I just wanted to go somewhere with no cell service, no expectations, and ideally no reminders of who I was pretending to be back home. I started out in Western Virginia and aimed south. No map, no reservations, no schedule, just a vague plan to cruise through the Appalachians and pull over when the vibe felt right. I figured I'd camp if the weather held, get a cheap motel room if it didn't, and avoid thinking too hard about the fact that I hadn't updated my road trip playlist since 2012. The first 3 days were perfect. The Blue Ridge Parkway was as close to soothing as I've ever felt behind the wheel. There were these moments driving along those long curves, sun slanting through the trees, windows down, where I actually forgot about everything waiting for me back home. Every now and then, I'd roll into some tiny town where the only restaurant was attached to a gas station and all they served was something rotating slowly under a heat lamp. It felt real in a way nothing back home had in a while. But then came day 4. I was somewhere along the Tennessee-North Carolina border. I remember that part clearly because I had circled this trail in my guidebook, Devil's Elbow. The name alone made it feel like one of those places you're either supposed to avoid or absolutely check out. I leaned toward the turnoff. Around 3 itias in the afternoon, I lost cell service. Expected, not a big deal. I found the turnoff for Devil's Elbow maybe 20 minutes later, but the lot was blocked by this old rusted chain sagging between 2 metal poles, like it had been there since the Carter administration. The sign looked like something out of a dusty nature museum, definitely not inviting. Still, I wasn't ready to give up. I figured maybe I could find a back road that cut closer to the trailhead. I drove around a while, slowly weaving through a network of unmarked forestry roads until I found this fork in the dirt. No signs, no arrows, just 2 narrow paths splitting off in different directions. The left one sloped downhill and looked a little more traveled. Tire tracks flattened weeds, so I chose it. Almost immediately, the trees closed in. The further I went, the darker it got. The canopy overhead was so dense it felt like someone had dimmed the sun. I turned the music off, cracked the window just in case there were birds or anything to break the silence. There weren't. Not even insects. Just my tires crunching gravel and my own breathing louder than it should have been. And then I saw it. A cabin maybe 50 feet back from the road, tucked between the trees like it was trying not to be noticed. 2 stories. Wooden siding faded to a dull grey. No chimney, no smoke, no lights. Just a porch that looked like it would collapse under a raccoon, and a door hanging slightly open like someone left in a hurry and never returned. I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't have a weapon. My phone was dead. The sun was going down and I still got out of the car. I wish I could blame curiosity, but honestly, it felt like something about that place was pulling me. Like when you're half asleep and you walk into a room without remembering why. The porch creaked like a warning when I stepped on it. I knocked, and the door pushed open another inch. Inside, it looked like the set of a horror movie before the fake blood. No furniture, no cobwebs, no animals, just bare wooden floors, a lot of dust, and weird dark stains that might have been anything but were probably what I didn't want them to be. Then I saw the footprints. Barefoot, human, not mine. They started at the front door, wandered toward the back hallway, and just stopped. No return trail, no explanation, just these perfect dusty imprints vanishing into the shadows. That should have been enough. But of course, I stepped further in. There was a plate on the kitchen counter. One chipped edge, a slice of bread on it, green with mold, stiff enough it looked like you could use it to wedge a door. And right next to it, a glass of water, half full, clear, no dust on the rim, which meant someone had been there. Recently. That was the moment I backed out. I didn't bolt, didn't scream, didn't even breathe hard. I just walked slow and controlled, like I hadn't just stepped into a scene from something I absolutely shouldn't have been part of. It was about halfway to the car when I saw her. She was standing behind it, dead center behind the bumper, maybe 10 feet away, thin, pale, wearing a long white nightgown that hung loose and dirty. Her hair was in a braid, coming undone like it hadn't been touched in days. She had no shoes, no expression, just stood there, watching me. I froze. I raised my hand, trying to sound casual. "Hey, you okay?" Nothing. I cleared my throat. "Do you need help?" Still nothing. Then she stepped forward. That was it for me. I sprinted to the car, dove in, locked the door, and jammed the key in the ignition. The engine made this dry clicking noise like it was choking. I turned the key again. Same sound. I glanced up. She was right there, inches from the window. Her hand pressed flat against the glass, smudging it. Then she leaned in and rested her forehead on the same spot. Her eyes didn't move, but her mouth did. She smiled. Too wide, too sudden, like someone trying to remember how smiling works after forgetting for years. I turned the key again. Engine coughed. Then it caught. She didn't flinch. I threw it in reverse, spun the wheels, and gunned it back up the road, barely staying on the path. I didn't look in the mirror. I didn't want to know. I didn't slow down until I hit cracked asphalt again. When I finally pulled into a gas station an hour later, it felt like stepping back into the real world. People were buying snacks, chatting, acting like the universe hadn't cracked open back there in the woods. I parked under the brightest overhead light I could find, locked every door, and spent the night curled up in the driver's seat with a tire iron across my lap like it was going to help. Next morning, I got a room in a motel 2 towns over. I stood under the shower until the water ran cold, lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan like it might explain something, then convinced myself it had all been stress. A hallucination, maybe. My brain telling me to go home. Then I went to the car and saw the handprint inside the driver's window. 5 fingers, wide palm, smears where the fingers had dragged downward. I hadn't opened the window. I hadn't touched that spot. When I ran my fingers over it, the print flaked off like old skin. I left the car at the motel, took a bus home, and thank God I'm safe.